Hey guys, STLYoungblood with you, and it's been a while since we've talked about ESFs in general, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And the reason we're doing that is because it's pretty relevant, especially with PU02 being in place, and some of the changes that actually took place with this update. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a warning. There's going to be a lot of numbers thrown at you here, so just strap in and get ready for that. But let's go ahead and just dive on right into it, because there's no point in pussyfooting around. Now, ultimately, the goal for these changes was to lower the damage that they can do against infantry and heavy armor. And we're talking about the nose cannon, so whether that be the default or the rotary. What they, as in the developer, said is, we want them to be excellent against air and light armor, but they are just too high on the list of killing infantry and armor right now. So that being the nose guns, I'm assuming, or maybe they're talking ESFs in general. But regardless, the changes that are happening is affecting the nose guns. So in order to accommodate the lower damage versus infantry, the resistance value against a new category, ESF nose cannons, needed to be adjusted. So with that in mind, they're claiming that the time to kill is going to remain close to live values, meaning the live server that we've all become familiar with, except for a couple different vehicles. Now, just to put this in perspective, you've got base weapon damage, and then you've got the resistance values that certain targets have. Basically, it's another variable that's put in there that impacts how much damage is actually being taken by the target, dependent on the type of weapon that's hitting them. Hopefully that makes sense. So, with that in mind, there's a couple vehicles that they've, just a couple things in general, that they've changed resistance to ESF nose cannons. The first one being the Flash. Basically, they're getting a resistance increase of about 50%. So that's really significant. Now, hopefully it's not making drastic changes, because, you know, they're small and fast, and assuming you're using your nose cannon, you should be rewarded for killing them. But again, they're really easy to kill anyway, so 50%, it sounds significant, but when the base armor's so low anyways, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Lightnings and MBT, so your big tanks, are seeing an increase of about 20%. Phalanx turrets are getting why the hell do I keep saying that? Turrets are seeing an increase of about 40%. And then mana turrets are seeing a resistance increase of about 25%. Now, for the life of me, I can't figure out why the hell the mana turret is getting an increase. But whatever, it is what it is. 25% noticeable, not tremendously drastic, at least in my mind. Now, as mentioned, one of the ways that they're planning on actually balancing this all out is by the damage ranges being changed. Now, fall-off damage is also being adjusted, and that's because it's going with their above goal. They're claiming that they want it to help with the balance of what you can kill with the nose cannons. And they're going to be adjusting other weapon values like the Walker to help overlap with these new damage ranges, creating a better dynamic ESF engagement ranges. That's what they had to say. So they also say, additionally, it provides further distinction between the default nose cannons and the rotary nose cannons. So let's just throw some numbers at you. Let's start with the default cannons. The M20 Mustang is actually seeing an increase for the Reaver, going from max damage range of 225 to 230. For those of you that don't know, max damage range is the farthest distance you can shoot and do your maximum damage. From what I've seen, the Sauron laser cannon and the M18 Needler are both staying the same at 200, meaning the Reaver is going to maintain its higher damage at longer ranges, kind of that faction-specific trait. Going along with that, the minimum damage ranges have decreased overall, and we're seeing the decrease in the Mustang from 350 to 330, the Sauron laser cannon's going from 325 to 300, and the Needler is getting the same thing on the Mosquito, going 325 to 300. Again, minimum damage range is how far out you can shoot up until the point when you hit the lowest damage your weapon could possibly do. So again, Reaver maintains his damage a little bit longer. That's going to kind of be the trend throughout this. Now, when we talk about the rotary cannons, the anti-air options, the Vortec rotary is going from, on max damage range, it's dropping from 150 to 130. And then the Hailstorm turbo laser on the Scythe and the M18 rotary are both going down to 100 from 125. So again, about a 30-meter difference between the two, or between the Reaver and the other two. Minimum damage on the Scythe and the Mosquito, you're going to see it drop down to 200 from 250 or 270, depending on the faction, and the Rotary's going from 275 to 230. Again, those are some pretty drastic changes. And when you compare them to what you're actually seeing, it's about a 100-meter difference between the default nose gun and the anti-air rotary nose guns. Pretty significant difference. And it's not just that, but especially when you consider some of the other changes that have taken place. You know, I'm thinking about the dynamic lock-on, where you get locked on faster the closer you are. This creates a bigger problem for the ESFs. You need to get closer to do as much damage as you possibly can, but getting closer is inherently dangerous for you because you're going to be locked on much faster. I also think about this when I'm engaging liberators. I prefer to be further away from a liberator because the closer you are, the more likely you're going to be hit by a Dalton round. So, you know, moving away. Now, one of the things that they've said here is that you know, they think that the time to kill values are going to remain pretty similar outside of some specific targets. Well, that leads kind of nicely into the damage changes, which we actually see, and I'm just going to read you guys this little section. But basically, it's finally we will be making some adjustments based on data gathered since the cannons were retuned several updates ago. Reload speeds are being adjusted to bring damage over time of each weapon closer to each other. This includes making the rotary damage over time closer to the default nose cannons. This removes an advantage the rotary had against high health targets such as MBTs, Galaxies, and Liberators. We also found the Mosquito nose cannons in general were outperforming, so we are lowering their magazine size advantage. I think we all kind of saw that last part coming, but here's where things get interesting. You're lowering your maximum damage range, and apparently these changes are going to be impacting how much damage you can do against Liberators or Galaxies. So all of a sudden, you've kind of got a combination of changes that makes it much harder for you to be as effective in the air. So with that in mind, let's look at the actual damage changes that we're seeing. There's a note here that says the Reaver's minimum damage is not lowered as much as the other Empires. The Mosquito's outperforming the other Empires, so we're lowering its magazine size advantage. That was listed several times, and I think it's just to really make sure that everybody understands that. The Mosquito's just done so well, they had to take a little bit more of the nerf bat. So, let's jump into it. The default nose cannons. We're seeing the Sauron laser cannon, the max damage is being decreased from 340 to 220. Pretty big difference. The minimum damage decreased from 255 to 184. Again, a pretty significant change. When we start talking about the M20 Mustang, it's from the max damage dropped from 400 to 250, and the minimum damage decreased from 290 to 200. That's a big, big drop. One thing that is notable is that the Reaver actually got a slight advantage on this change, where we see that the reload speed reduced from 2.5 seconds to 2.4 seconds. So a 0.1 second reduction in reload speed. Probably barely noticeable, but it's something worth pointing out because it's something the other factions didn't get. Now, the M18 Needler went from 315 to 200 on the max damage size, and the minimum damage went from 245 to 167. So, just to point this out, we're seeing the Mustang having the highest max and minimum damage, followed by the Sauron laser cannon, and finally the Needler. The Needler also took a little bit more of the brunt of this force, with the magazine size being reduced from 75 to 70. Not a huge difference, but noticeable. One other thing to point out with this is there's an added leg shot multiplier of -0.1 if you hit an infantry person in the leg. Basically, this goes along with the theme of making the nose cannons less effective against infantry. Now, when we move over to the rotary nose cannons, again, we see similar changes. The Hailstorm Turbo Laser, the maximum damage decreased from 360 to 230, pretty big hit. Minimum damage decreased from 300 to 167. And they see a slight increase in the reload speed going from 1.75 seconds to 1.8 seconds. A little bit more noticeable than the 0.1 second before, but it's not huge. The Vortec on the Reaver dropped from 500 to 320 on the maximum damage side. Minimum damage went from 425 to 210. Big decreases there. We're seeing the reload speed increase 0.25 seconds from 2 to 2.25. And then with the M18 rotary, we're seeing 315 on the max damage down to 200, and then 200 to 143 on the minimum damage. We're seeing the magazine size reduced from 50 to 45, and the reload speed increased by 0.25 seconds. Again, rotary taking the biggest brunt on the Mosquito. So when we compare these, again, the Vortec rotary on the Reaver still maintains its power at the top, and you know it's got 320 max, 210 minimum compared to 230 and 167 on the Hailstorm, and then 200 and 143 on the Vortec, or on the I'm sorry, Mosquito. So I know that's a lot of numbers. Again, it's significant changes as far as your effective range. Now, again, I haven't played a ton since this has come out, so I'm interested to see how this all plays out the more I get around to flying. I'll tell you, I haven't noticed significant changes, so I think at least what they're saying as far as you know, the adjustments in multiple areas with the resistances and the damages, it's all felt about the same. Again, I haven't really farming. I haven't really hunted infantry too much with my nose cannons. Air-to-air still feels about the same, so I need to play a little bit more with it just to see how much of an effect this ends up actually having. So the last thing that I really want to kind of talk about is it sounds like, and you'll notice a lot of complaining on the forums and different locations, but you'll hear pilots saying, we are getting nerfed again, and this is significant because of blank. Well, one of the things that's not really being laid out is all the different changes and how they impact it. So let's kind of just wrap this up into a nice little bow. We know that the effective range of these vehicles is being reduced. We know the damage is being dropped, and we know that the effectiveness against armor and infantry is significantly decreased. So outside of that, there's other things that are impacting you. So if you want to talk about buffs to flak armor, that's almost a nerf to rocket pods if you think about it, because flak armor it's increased. Nanoweave's effectiveness has decreased a little bit, so you're going to see more people running flak, and it's more effective, meaning your secondary, if you choose to go rocket pods, all of a sudden makes you a little bit less effective. Now, again, the buff to lock-on time, it makes it much more difficult for ESFs to get into fights and then close engagement areas. We've kind of hit on that already, but you're less effective at range, so you need to close the range. But when you close the range, you're being locked on faster. Kind of an issue there. So yeah, and then the last one, with some of the resist value changes, we've seen that some of these turrets now, especially like the AV mana turrets, can actually one-hit kill an ESF. That's something that we didn't really see before. I mean, it did damage, but it wasn't going to just knock you right out of the sky. So that's something else that's actually going to be really kind of impacting you. So there's more changes that aren't directly changes to the ESF, but it impacts the gameplay, and that's what kind of changes the roles overall. So get out there, play with your ESFs, let me know what you think. I'm going to be flying quite a bit more over the next couple days to get a better feel for how much this actually changes the game. Again, I flew a little bit this morning. I didn't feel like anything was super drastic, but there are significant changes, and I was being locked onto more than I had in the past. So we'll see. So if you guys have questions, let me know. Otherwise, give this a like if you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more. I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.